Welcome to Crossroads and Cauldrons. We are two witches with jobs, families, and busy lives just like you. We talk about weaving the web of community, practicing magic, and life in the Deep South. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Selena, and you're listening to Crossroads and Cauldrons podcast. We have a very special guest with us today, and I'm over the moon to present Laura Tempest Zakroff. Hello, Laura. How are you?
I am excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So this is your first time on our show, so I'm going to tell a little bit about you so everybody will know where you're coming from. Laura is a professional artist, author, performer, and modern traditional witch based out of New England. She has a BFA from Rhode Island School of Design, and her artwork has received awards worldwide. Her art embodies myth and the esoteric through her drawings and paintings, jewelry, talismans, and other designs. Welcome. I usually tell a little bit about my first experience with our guest, and then we'll go from there. So I first became aware of you when I read Sigil Witchery, which is fantastic. That was my introduction to your work. And then Weave the Liminal was wonderful. And I'm a weaver, so any analogies about weaving, you've got my attention. And then I got your Oracle deck as well, which is wonderful, your Liminal Spirits Oracle. And I was was it Temple Fest that you did a workshop for Anatomy of the Witch?
Yes. Our one of our first virtual conferences, right? We're like,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I saw your workshop for Anatomy of a Witch there, and I took like crazy meticulous notes. So I was very glad when the book came out, and I have it here, and it's absolutely wonderful. So I do want to talk about that quite a bit. But first, I'd like to hear a little bit about you and sort of how your practice evolved to incorporate your artwork and your music, or if it evolved out of that. Just tell us a little bit about how you came to your path.
Okay, well, how much time do we have?
Small question. You go ahead. We're good.
Everyone, get some whiskey. All right, here we go. So, this has been a journey now of, we're getting close to 3 decades. It sneaks up on you, right? Like, oh gosh. But for me, art has always been a major part of my life, and kind of studying art very young, I was instantly drawn to the myths and the cultures that so much art was coming from, whether that was Egypt or Mesopotamia, India, Japan, like all these different places from all over the world going back thousands of years. And as I learned more about modern paganism in my teens, I was like, wait, there are people out there who are doing these things, who are interested in the same thing. Because I am the result of basically a Russian Jew and an Italian Sicilian Catholic. And so it's like, well, I know these things exist in the world, but I wasn't sure if there was much outside of that was still being practiced today, right? We hear so much about what happened in history, but to know that there are witches today, at least going back at that time. So I was really starting to explore what that meant beyond just my personal beliefs, but in a group format as I hit college. And I went to, as I said, RISD. So art and magic and ritual were instantly combined. And at that same time, I started to take up dance. So that was the next element of like, all right, well, everybody in the group, we're all going to take belly dancing classes and try to bring in drumming, try to see what this does for our ritual. How do we create ecstatic ritual? And so those early formative experiences just kind of stuck. And it seems like everything bleeds over into the next thing. And so it's kind of a big cauldron.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize you had come to dance, I would say late in life. That's not late in life, but for dance, that's pretty late. I did dance as a young child up through college, and then I quit, which was dumb. But anyway, but that's fascinating because you teach dance and you have studied all different sorts of folk dance and the use of dance and movement and ritual. And that's something that I'm deeply interested in, but I don't know that I have the resources near me to explore that. Or it might be an excuse, and maybe I haven't looked hard enough. That's possible. So how did that shape your practice once you started digging into those cultural movements?
It how do I say this? Like the first time that I heard what is it's the IU rhythm, but we tend to call it the Czar rhythm, even though there's a variety of different rhythms that are associated with Czar trance dance. The first time I heard it was at a concert. It was I think it was Labana. It was a live concert back in the '90s, and I'm like this is like clicking into something in the back of my brain that like that long forgotten thing that feels so familiar. And realizing that like the music can tap into this ritual element, and going to church and they have like hymns and such, it's like, yeah, it kind of does a thing. It creates atmosphere, but you don't move. Okay, at least not in Catholic Church, you don't move to that sort of thing. And also learning some Jewish dances early on, like, oh, those are nice, those are fun, but it wasn't the kind of same like an understanding in a ritual context of that. So being able to study more of throughout the Mediterranean, a lot of the trance dances, from the kind of heavy ones like the Czar to the Tarantella or the Tarantata in Italy, of like kind of more, not to say it's upbeat, but it's a 6/8 rhythm, so it feels more upbeat in how it affects the body. Really kind of tapped into the sense of how you move the body gives you a sense of what energy you're producing, how you're connecting to the world around you, how you're interacting with other people in ways that just sitting there doesn't get to it. And in terms of raising energy, and of course, if you're running around, doing a spiral dance, I think most, magical practitioners, pagans, and witches, like, oh yes, spiral dance. That's sort of often a chaotic experience, as anyone who's ever been at the front end or the end of the line. That's a kind of uh, a different kind of activity versus the simple movements. Like, you don't have to be up and moving your legs, right? You can be sitting and work with your hands. You can work with your breath and create movement and contribute and build something up, whether it's just with you or with other people, that just is so much more immediate than doing long litanies or um, some of the other activities that, they're all great, but there's something more instantaneous and more primal, I think, into that basis of dance.
I think you touched on something. A lot of questions I get from students and listeners and things like that is they hear, the words raise energy. This is the part of the ritual where you raise energy, and you can use all these different methods, but it doesn't click what that means, or it seems like it has to be this big exuberant thing, and it really doesn't. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
using breath can raise energy. Small movements and changes in your physicality can raise energy and fuel your magic and fuel your spell, fuel your healing, your transformation, all of that stuff. And I really deeply enjoyed you talking about those things in your book and really breaking it down into small but profound ways that I think everyone can relate to. Um, you mentioned the passage of time, whatever that may be. I have been practicing for a long time, and for me, this book was it almost felt like things were being rewound, like it was an opportunity to go back to the beginning. What are the first things you learn, in a mystery school? Look at the candle, focus on your breath, right?
Right.
That's it. So it was an opportunity to revisit that, and it felt like having a guide to say, okay, now try this little adjustment, really focus your mind on this element of what you're doing. And I think that has breathed a lot of life into my practice that has been missing since March of 2020. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I recommend your book to practitioners of every, level of practice, because it really grounds the technique into you're embodying consciousness rather than, I don't know, we talk about raising awareness and raising consciousness and all of those things, but we don't talk about the physical consciousness of all of your body. You know, that comes to like the mind. So what how did you get to how did Anatomy of a Witch come to be? Like what got you to break out all of those pieces into their individual parts and then sew them back together at the end, which was brilliant.
Thank you.
My favorite chapter, The Weaver. I was like, yes, it's all coming together now.
The master plan. I think each of my books taps into where I see that there's a need. You know, when prior to 2020, especially being able to go out into the world and tour and do workshops all over and meet all different kinds of folks, seeing like what problems do people have, what questions, what are they running into again and again. Especially like oh yes, I've heard this again, and this is a common theme that we see, and people tend to often think that they're whatever issue crisis that they're facing, they're the only ones doing it, and like no, you are one of many, not to belittle that, but to realize like you're not the only one going through this. So Sigil Witchery is very much the art aspect of it. Weave the Liminal is like, how do I get this together? How do I craft a path? And then we have with Anatomy is that movement aspect. Now, having taught dance for 25 years now, just about, doesn't matter if it's a professional dancer or a magical practitioner, there are still common things that we all face as society, and especially the majority of cultures in the world are like, dance, it's only for these people, right? Mm-hmm. It's just for those. You're not supposed to move. If you're going to be a dancer, we have cat drama happening.
Cat drama is always welcome, except for my cats. I have to kick them out.
Okay, like just outside the door, so back focus. In that, people think when they hear dance that it's such a limited thing, but it's not. So being able to, especially I love, my favorite group of folks to teach dance to is magical practitioners, because you see instantaneously in those first few moments of, oh my gosh, I get it and I feel it, and it's so exciting. It's something that you can see built to your practice versus a dancer who might think, okay, how do I use this in the choreography? I'm like, no, I want you to feel it in the moment and still not be concerned about what it looks like. I want you to think about how it feels. So this is tapping into those elements. But also, so much of this is a culmination of those years of my practice of like, what's important to me, and why do I have these breathing exercises, and why does the heart image show up in my art so much, and why has the serpent image been there for, going on 20 years, and coalescing that into those systems, like realizing that like with real proper anatomy, when you look at it from a scientific point of view, like we're in grade school, like, and here are the 7 or 9 systems, and now if you look up like how many systems are there in the body, they're like 13, 15, 20, we don't know. Like the whole systems thing is actually a lie, because all of these organs are working together to make our bodies work. Like the bones, right? For example, like they are making the blood cells. So you like to leave them out of the circulatory system is or like to miss the point of how everything is interwoven. So to me, that seemed the perfect metaphor for a magical practice, is to realize like you can look at these in parts, but they have to come back together. You can't just be in the body and you can't just be in your brain. You have to find everything coalescing together.
Well, you've done a beautiful job of it. And I'll tell you, my favorite part was involving the hands and the feet, because true confession, I am an artist, not, on your level, but I'm working on it. But I'm always been a creator, and working with my hands, like that's the biggest fear I have, is losing my hands and having to figure out, why am I here now? But I have not actively like honored my hands and done all, ritually had gratitude for my hands and my skills and those different things. So the hands and the feet, thank you for incorporating all of those little things, and taste and smell and things that are sort of touched on, and I still feel like this was just a touching, but you dug in more deeply to that, and I feel like there's a well of things people can continue to explore and develop with this jumping off point. So I deeply appreciate Anatomy of the Witch. Everybody go get it, read it. There's an audiobook. I listened to that as well, and it's nicely narrated, well done. But I would say work through the exercises. Don't just read it, work it. Like when you get to an exercise, put it down, do the thing, pick it back up. It doesn't take long. And it really kind of gets your gears moving. And my gears have been sort of getting more and more disconnected since the pandemic. It's kind of everybody knows. We're tired of talking about it, but yet we still are. Things sort of slowed down for me in a lot of ways, in places that I was receiving connection. I'm not getting. So I started out the pandemic trying to make it all the same. Like, okay, we'll just move all the rituals online and we'll do everything here. And it's not the same. And eventually that fell away, and, it's just been difficult. So bringing that practice back into my body, less, out into the world, even sitting at the altar, communing with your spirits and your ancestors and your deity, that's still perceived as an external experience. Mm-hmm. So this really, really deliberately and consciously brought everything back into my physicality and divinity here in this middle world. So thank you. And also I like the kittens, reaching for the kittens. Like, that's my favorite. I was like, yes, she understands me. Perfect. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's this is something I've been doing for about 10 years with my dancers. It's I find I have these sort of patterns where I end up, like, when I'm starting to teach things, I'm teaching very advanced concepts to advanced practitioners. And at some point I have to dial things back and go, okay, go back to the beginning. And especially when I started teaching dance, like beginning dance to folks rather than, skill technique workshops, is you have to first rethink your whole process. What does it mean to go back to those basics? And then think of creative ways to teach it, and being able to, like, use the kittens. It's amazing how it transforms. Like, people who've been dancing for years, people who've never, like, also, I'm like, I got it. Like, it's silly, but it tricks the brain enough to get that result in there. And that is, again, sometimes you need to be a bit silly for your brain to disengage those bad gears, those rusty gears. They're like, no.
I love that so much, though, too, because especially with anything involving the body and movement, particularly in Western cultures, I would say, people are so self-conscious. And so when you're like, reach for the kitten, it just breaks whatever those trappings are that we do to ourselves. It just kind of brings us out of that and infuses some joy into the moment. So I love that. It's like, and any of my students will tell you, like, when I set myself on fire in ritual, it happens sometimes. I teach what not to do by watching. Those moments really kind of bring joy and bring moments where you're not taking yourself so seriously. The work is serious, but you don't have to take yourself so seriously in the work. Like, find joy in the work. So I really appreciated that. And you said something, hold on, it's going to come back. Maybe this happens occasionally. It's a glitch. We're going to work on it. What did you say? We were talking about the pandemic. You were talking about, teaching in person. How has your teaching changed since you've had to move to an online format? I know for me that I've had to, the energy is different. It obviously can be done, because what is space, what is time? Nothing. But it is different. It takes a different style of working to still connect to your students, particularly new students that don't have, like you said, they don't have a long time practicing and learning energy work and things like that. How's it impacted your work?
Oh, for it depends on the topic. So teaching the finer points of witchcraft, talking about anatomy or teaching sigil witchery, I have found that doing Zoom, as long as I can see people, I feel like it's not the same energy cycle that you get when you're teaching live, but as long as I can see your faces, it's like, okay, I'm not speaking into the ether, or the void. The void is not staring back at me. Right?
Yeah.
But it's harder for dance. And so I haven't been teaching dance workshops as much. I kind of do them like maybe once every 3 months, because it's a lot of work for me, like to get the camera in the right spot and also to be able to see the people. I'm trying to give the feedback that's necessary, right? And a lot of people don't have great cameras or internet connections, or they feel shy, which when you're in a private space, right? When you're feeling like you're in a hotel workshop room, it still feels like this is, we're in a safe space together because that everybody's there for the same cause. So I think that's why the Witchual Workouts really kind of kicked off, because it's like, here I am, I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm going to talk to what I imagine is the folks out there and pretend this is the situation, but it's not long enough that it starts exhausting me, because there isn't anything coming back. At least not immediately, right? Like, yes, the comments later and folks telling me about it is great. So yeah, it really does depend on like what's being offered, and yeah, that's why I don't do pre-recorded stuff either. I hate doing pre-recorded because then I'd rather do it live and let the words flow, because I always what are words?
What are words, right?
Words are hard. Though I had to do a workshop where I had like one person, and everybody else was going to get the pre-recorded thing or the post-recorded thing later, and like, well, I'm just going to pretend that there's more than just one person who isn't like even have their camera on, type of thing. And
Yeah.
like, good thing I've stored that, right? Like I've had a year and a half of this to be like, I'm just going to pretend you're all there. But it's still pretty exhausting. That was only half an hour one. I was like,
Yeah, it is. Well, and you get something too when you're in an in-person space together and you're creating, a container of energy and a container of group mind and things like that. They're feeding you, you're feeding them, and it creates this circuit. For my experience, my students are going to hear this and complain. Don't email me. I feel like I have to push a lot more and project a lot more so that they're able to receive, without falling asleep. But that might be
right.
me as well. But I don't get the same back. I constantly tell my student, nod vigorously, like feed me, feed me
Yeah.
some more. So that can be exhausting. I can imagine that would be difficult with dance. But you mentioned exactly where I was going with that. The Witchual Workouts. Those were delightful. I started following along with you. I haven't done them all, but I've done several during the pandemic. And I was like, this is what I've needed all this time. This is why I can't do a workout program, because it's not this. So they're perfect because the movement is not the focus of the movement. The focus of the movement is on honoring deity, creating sacred space, honoring the elements, honoring yourself. Tell us how that came to be for you.
It has, with most things I do, there's usually like a three-prong, multi-prong part of rooted thing. The first part was as I was writing Anatomy of a Witch, and I had a few different students and folks in my Patreon who were test reading. And I got a few comments of like, well, I love this, but I really wish, it's hard for me to read it and imagine what the movement is, that's the biggest challenge, right? With movement is trying to break it to words and get it across without, silly pantomizing pictures
Right?
in a book. So that, if I could only like have videos like that explain some of these things. So that was starting to percolate in the back of my head. And then as I hit August of last year, I was like, I feel like crap because I am used to being able to be on the road, performing with my partner, doing, all sorts of things that are much more active. Like I need to move, and I am not an exercise minded person. I'm like, I'm not going to like, here, I'm going to go do my 2 hours of yoga and 3, of Pilates. Like great for the people who can do that, but I can't. I just like, nope. And working in the garden all day also doesn't do it. So being able to kind of keep myself accountable, right? So it was like, well, yeah, sure, I'll dance today. It's like, no, if I'm creating a video and other people are participating, then I am accountable for this and for what they're doing as well. Though when I hit 150 of them, I'm like, I think we're good for a while.
Do them all twice in a year, and you're,
Yeah.
But they're wonderful. I'm so glad you did that. My son loves them. He likes being the owl and, different thing. I was like, yes, this is what I need. So if you ever like start little Witchual workouts around in local places, I want to teach it locally here. But yeah, that was wonderful. I have a list here. Let me see what's on my list. I talked about that, talked about kittens. Oh, I was really interested in how you brought the cauldron of posey into Anatomy of the Witch, and different ways to activate the cauldrons. Do you want to share about that a little bit? How you got?
Sure.
I like the physical. My witchcraft is very practical, even though like mentally I'm off in space. Generally, the actual act of it is lots of scrubbing. Generally, so I liked having a physical cauldron to represent the different cauldrons and like cleaning them with your elbow grease. It was great. You go.
My first book, The Witch's Cauldron, is all about cauldrons. Right. And I think it's chapter 9 was the spiritual cauldrons. This is where I talk about the cauldrons, the cauldron of posey, and the 3 aspects, which when I look at so many aspects of practice as well as different cultures again around the world, is that we tend to have a threefold soul or threefold way of looking at spirit in many ways. And I love the cauldrons because they just instantly correlated to 3 points that I think everybody can understand. Like once you get past 3, it gets confusing for a lot of people, and they're like, well, I can touch my head, I can feel my heart, I can feel my belly, boom. And so it becomes very easy for them to understand, and working through movement with them, and you can be very whether it's dance movement or if it's a very physical movement, it's like what kind of ways does your brain work? And so I've recognized also for teaching this many years is that some people like these metaphors. Some people need very physical, like, okay, now you are going to expand the diaphragm for whatever that means and move your trapezius. Like that's how they work. And then people are like, I can't visualize anything. I need something physical. I'm like, okay, then you have a physical cauldron in there, which represents, and coming from, especially from my long line of grandmoms on the both sides are like, to fix things, you have to clean things, right? So like being able to physically clean, whenever the house is, out of sorts, like physically clean, then you can bless stuff. But first you got to clean it. So that kind of grandmother wisdom comes in and like, I fix the problem. All right. If I can't visualize this cauldron inside my body, I can put this one in front of me and do that. I can fill it up with pretty crystals or candy or whatever I want to, words, whatever it helps to get your brain to work, because our brains work in many beautiful, different, diverse ways. So trying to get as many folks to understand as possible in whatever way is most accessible for them.
It's wonderful. And you're absolutely right. Like physical sensory input is part of, the matrix of our consciousness. It's part of our spirit. It's not, I drill this. It was drilled into my head. I drill this into my students. Your physical body is part of your soul. It's part of your spirit. So, and there's biological triggers which will activate if only you will listen to your body. So I love that. I've got like visions of having a three little shelves and 3 little cauldrons, and I'm gonna keep up with them. I promise. I will. Anyway, it's gone again. Wow, words. I myself am not with the words. I don't know. One thing I was going to talk about. Where did it go? Oh, let's talk about not necessarily sigil witchery in particular, but art as a as part of your magical practice. This fascinates me. So for me, often it'll come through as a vision or dream or a message from spirit or a myth, a deity or a spirit that I'm trying to connect with and understand, and creating a piece of art, whether it's sculpture or visual, painting, drawing, whatever, weaving. Spinning is a huge part of my practice. It comes through in those moments, and I have a keener understanding of what I'm looking at. What is your process with your artwork as ritual, as spiritual practice? What does that look like? Words.
Words.
It's hard. It's hard sometimes, y'all.
So, and art, it really depends on what need it's filling at that time. So much of my art does come from visions. So I'll have a little snippet of something and like I've got to create that image. Or it might be where I have a client who wants a devotional painting to a deity who, let's say, someone who I don't work with, right? And that's sort of like taking on a client where you have to learn everything about the client and say, okay, well, what is your experience with this deity? And so you become this interesting intermediary of, what is the divine aspect one and what is the practitioner one, and where do you find that space in between? So like that's a different kind of state. And within sigils, right, whether it's something I'm creating for myself or creating for a group, right, there's those also different processes that are involved that have a kind of ritual context. But I don't have a kind of high ritual, like must cast a circle, must do all these things. Like at most, I might light a candle because it smells good. Right? It smells good. It feels warm. And, especially this time of year, I like to add a little more light into my space because this is my studio here. This is the temple. It's already blessed. It's already set. So when I come in here, I know that work is going to happen in some way if it wants to. Otherwise, there's the internet. So, sometimes it's just like I have a need, and then sometimes it's pushed by, like right now I'm working on a new winter solstice painting because I have to remember, like, you don't think about doing solstice related product, right? The week of the solstice, you have to create the art, and then like for things to be made, whether it's cards or ornaments or such, like, well, I want to revel in Halloween and Samhain a little bit more, but I have to get this done in order to get these things done so that they'll be ready for that time. So it's a different part of the brain too.
Yeah, no, I'm really bad at that, generally speaking. The week before it's due is my wheelhouse. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It
Yeah.
works for books. It really works for books.
I'm one of those people that if I don't have like a firm deadline, it's never going to happen, even though I want it to. You have to tell me I need this tomorrow, and I'll be like, I'll do it 3 different ways and give you options. But yeah, I was literally thinking about that the other day. I have to put this pen down because it's clicky, and our producer will yell at me with his face if I click a pen. I'm sure this is just as annoying as clicking the pen. But I was thinking about, I got to start thinking about Yule, and I got to start thinking about Embalk, and I'm hoping that we can sort of be back in person and offering in-person rituals. But at the same time, the last 3 times I've tried to plan something to be in person, we've had a new variant or we've had an outbreak, and it's just kind of like, okay, so I'm gonna plan something for myself, and then that I can translate to public if need be. I don't know why I got on that tangent. There was a thing. Okay, here it is. It's back. I'm kind of like this. There was. I lost it. It's coming back. It's coming back. Okay, so inspiration for artwork. This is something I want to personally. This is for me. I hope my listeners enjoy it, but this is my question. I am working on. I'm exploring how inspiration comes through to people, and how we spiritually connect with the creations themselves, and sort of like, where do they really come from? I've got some Aquarius rising, so that's what that's about. So how does that come through for you? Like, I feel like the things I'm creating aren't necessarily from me or have anything to do with me, and I'm like a conduit that it has to come through at times. Do you have that sensation? What's your relationship with those things as you're being a bridge?
I said since there are different ways, it does have, you almost look at like different different levels of internet. Remember back in the day, you have dial
Oh
up,
yeah.
you have cable, you've got all those different things. Um, but this is all actually kind of a bit fresh because I just finished writing Visual Alchemy, which is sort of Sigil Witchery 2.0 that will be out next year, which is about, it's really about the art, where art and magic intersect. So it's such an important thing. And I really feel like so much of inspiration and vision, whether it is coming from a divine source or a spirit, other people's consciousness, but also I love the idea that the ideas themselves are a type of consciousness. And I I made quite a squeeze down. I was reading Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
yes, where she describes like the ideas they want to be born. They want to, like, this is how the slutty muses come out into the world. It's like they want, they're just like they're hitting all the doors. I'm like, yes, this is what happens. This is part of it. Is that, like, if we look at magic starting at thought, so magic starts with thought. Well, where do thoughts come from, right? They're electric pulses. There's some sort of thing that's connected there. There's ideas. All right, then the ideas have a consciousness to themselves and want to be pushed through, and it's looking for the worthy vessel, or the active hands in order to do that. But I think it's also, we have the choice of wanting to do it, and once it comes through us, through through our connective line, like sometimes, yeah, you got that direct boom, powerful, here it is, and then sometimes it takes a circuitous route or breaks down or changes a bit in that process. So uh, yeah, the source of these things, I know.
I the universe, right? I've had obviously everybody has like dry spells where they feel like inspiration is kind of, the valve is turned off. My One of my primary problems is I have too much stuff coming in and I don't know where to go and I feel like a total spaz about it. And you're absolutely right. When if something comes in and I don't get to it, somebody else does it. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
see it and I'll be like, okay, that's done. I can take that off my list. Somebody else did that. But it, oh my God, I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, no, you're right. Like, depending on what you need, because sometimes you have to, like, I need a thing for this event that's coming up or this thing that I'm producing or whatever, and I have to connect to the energies that I'm trying to bring through and like woo it, bring it
Mm-hmm.
forward. And that's a totally different experience than that I have to make this right now thing. Um yeah, so I'm excited to explore more about that when you're next. You said it. What's it? It's the next edition of Sigil Witchery, or in your mind, it's Sigil Witchery 2.0.
It
What's that
is
going to
because
be
it
called?
goes into a lot of the, after the book came out, and I've taught that workshop now hundreds of times, and the different questions that people have, whether it's been in person or virtual, it tackles that, but it really goes into the art making process itself, and why that is magic and how that's like led towards human evolution, and what does it mean to create something personally for yourself, and what does it mean to create like kind of shared or communal magic, through art. And it's like, you're like, really, no, everybody can make art, and this is why it's important.
I'm very excited about that. When's that coming out? I'm going to make a note without clicking my pen.
I believe it is October of 2022. um like next year, so it's going to be kind of crazy because the oracle deck that's associated with Anatomy of a Witch, will be released some point next summer. And then I think I found out, I think it's October that this book has, like, okay, the oracle's going to come out, and then people are like, and then you just wrote a book. Like, no, publishing doesn't work this way. It didn't just turn around and do it in a month. It says years in the making when these things come out.
Well, that's very exciting. I'm going to write that down. So I have a question for you, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask people when they come on the show. What is the upcoming future project that you're most excited about? Now, this can be something that's already in the works. It can be something that you've got an idea for. It can be something that, before I die, this is the thing. What is that?
I just mentioned the two that are in the works, right? Though technically the second oracle, the Anatomy of a Witch Oracle, it's kind of done, minus the little finessey bits that that happens in the art department and as we edit the little booklet and such. And the same thing like Visual Alchemy's, and it's about to go into second draft, so that's a bit. But kind of looking at 2022 of like what haven't I done yet? Like this is the first time that I've finished a project or in pretty much near the end of finishing projects with my publisher that I haven't been like, and here to my editor, like, here's the next idea, like, because my brain loves to, I guess, procrastinate by creating. Like, I should be working on this manuscript, but here's the idea for the next one.
I know exactly what you mean.
It's like, sit down, shut up. You were so excited about this when the previous book was trying to be written, right? So, I don't know, I've kind of got a secret thing that I'm hoping will come, but I don't want to say anything about that secret thing that might take place for that. But I guess the next one that most people want to hear is like, will there be a tarot deck? And like, yes, at some point there will be a tarot deck. So
now you said the next thing that most people want to hear. So what about you? Like, what do you want to? What do you about you?
I would say that I'm going to describe it as the thing that I'd really want is to create one of those beautiful little books that is widely accessible, but is a work of art unto itself. So it's the wisdom meets the image in such a way. Like I kind of thought Anatomy of a Witch was going to be like a fully illustrated type of book, but really those concepts in there, like yes, it has illustrations, but not in the same idea of like a full color hardcover. I think we all, if you're a book file, you're like, I love books. Having something that's a gorgeous hardcover, but also because I'm an artist, being able to illustrate completely that is more than just black and white. I want full color.
Yeah, I get that. I will say though, I think for Anatomy of the Witch, because it's geared towards awakening everyone's individual thing, I think it's great because that allows people to fill in that color and express that themselves within that framework. Does that make sense?
Whereas, absolutely.
Yeah. So I do like I like the ink drawings. They're so pretty. But I get you as well. So I am excited for that. Please do it.
I will. It's a good point about Anatomy too, because part of the reason why there isn't a body on the cover is because it is, I want anybody of any age, any ability, any gender to kind of see this and like connect to that's what's part of them, rather than having it. So a little snarky thing. I had nothing to do with the cover of the audiobook, and it upsets me greatly.
Yeah, I noticed that it was different, and I was like, okay.
I'm like, how did you go? I'm like, because the audio publisher is different than the physical publisher, right? I did get to choose the narrator for this book. I had nothing to do at absolutely whatsoever with the Liminal, which was a shock because I was going to record it myself. So I'm like, what? Someone's already what? But at least the cover was, they ended up buying the rights to the cover. But this one, when I saw that, like, this looks like a 90s, like, the whole point is it doesn't have a goddess figure or god figure on there. Like, so it's kind of very upsetting.
I can understand that. Yes, I have some close friends who worked with various publishers for long enough that they just started their own publishing company for very similar reasons. Mm-hmm. But you know better than I for sure. But the narration is excellent on the audiobook, I will say. What was I going to say? You said a thing, and then my brain was like, talk about that. No, it's not. It's not you. It's this right here. I don't know. It's gone. It might come back. It might not. But yeah, I do like that. I like that there's not a physical body on it, and that it really speaks to all different body types and genders and gender expressions and all those different things so smoothly and so easily. I remember what the thing was. Okay. Yay! I even have a note right here on my paper, which I didn't look at. I have to say that your voice is so clear in your writing. Like when I'm reading it, it feels like you're in the room because you're going to say something kind of goofy and you're going to say something that brings you back to being present with the book, being present with what you're receiving. And it's wonderful. Your voice is very distinct and clear in your work, which I love. I love that. And your artwork too. Like, you've got a lot of different, I'm not gonna say different styles necessarily, but yeah, different artistic styles,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all your style. Like, I can spot your work everywhere. I see it. I'm like, I know who did that. And then it was. So I think that's interesting because it kind of points us to who you are. It's like a little peek behind where it's coming from. Your beautiful spirit is expressed in your work, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to take part in that and read and explore those things with you. So I deeply appreciate Anatomy of Witch and Sigil Witchery and Weave the Liminal and everything that you've done. And please continue making and creating and teaching. I have to say, I follow your Patreon. You are so damn generous with your time. So generous with your time. Throughout the whole pandemic, you've been doing like weekly Zoom meetings and just you share so much of your practice and your craft. And almost every day it's like, hey guys, I'm doing this thing. And I just love it. It's so refreshing. And I deeply appreciate everything that you do. I've only been able to attend like one of the Wednesday things because of the day of the week that they're on, but that's okay. You do you, and you're wonderful. So everybody go check out all of Laura's work. Where can we find you?
So probably one of the easiest places is you can go to my website, which is lauratempestzakroff.com. And that will get you to the shop, it gets you to the books, it gets you the blog. Or if you find me on Instagram, which is alchemy.arts, and that's spelled OWLKEYME.arts, because I am a dork and I love owls. So that will get you to the link tree, which I think is linktree/alchemy, same spelling, which that gives you like a dozen links of things that I do, like Patreon and YouTube and all that kind of stuff.
And all of those links will be in the show notes as well. So check those out. Last thing, Laura, before you go, do you have anything that you would like to say to new practitioners, young artists, new people that are starting to work with their craft and their artistry as one? What would your tip be?
Trust your intuition. I understand when you're starting out, you go like, how do I, what is everybody else doing? Or it's supposed to look like this, right? And we're not taught to follow our intuition. So I'm not saying this is an easy thing. It's definitely a hard thing, but go with your gut and experiment and explore. Don't be afraid to try things. But if you're worried about messing things up, make sure there's proper ventilation.
Excellent. Safety first, guys. Safety first. Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute blessing to have you on the show. And I do hope that you'll come back. Hopefully next fall we can talk about your several new things that have just come out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime. You're welcome anytime. And that was the show, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Blessed be. Thank you all so much for listening, and don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. It helps us get our podcast in front of more listeners just like you. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can leave us a voicemail by clicking the link in the description of this episode, and you can always find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Crossroads and Cauldrons Podcast.